The finale of The Wheel of Time is a hodgepodge of unexplained and unconvincing conflicts that ends in befuddlement. I might hate this episode more than I hated episode 6, which would make it the worst episode of the whole series for me, and I am just baffled and mystified by the choices that were made that brought us to this dreck. I don't know what else to say. I am very angry that I am this negative because I was such a fan of the show. I was so looking forward to this Wheel of Time series. It was, a little bit of a rocky start, but by episode 4, I thought, okay, they're making changes, but at least they're gonna stay true to the characters and the overall conflicts. And now I don't feel that way anymore. The ending of The Wheel of Time Season 1 had a low bar because the end of The Eye of the World, the book, is also deeply confusing. It wasn't going to be, in my estimation, that hard to top that ending, knowing what we know about the entire series that Robert Jordan probably only sort of knew based on like a skeleton of an outline. And I am just mystified that this ending missed the mark so badly. I think it is worse than the book, not in terms of its, execution, although that too, but more in the sense that the conflicts and what is going on is just as confusing, if not more confusing, than what happens in the books. And I'm disappointed. So, being that it's Christmas Eve, or in my case, the eve before Christmas Eve because of the time zone that I'm in when this show airs for me, I gotta pour myself a glass of wine. I'm gonna pour more wine into this glass. I'm gonna drink this glass of wine off camera, and then we are going to dig into why this final episode of The Wheel of Time was so disappointing to me. Now, again, if you loved it, please tell me in the comments. It makes me feel better, honestly, when people love it and they say, hey, you're being too harsh on it. We had a really good time. We didn't expect so much from the show, and so it's an enjoyable ride for us. We're really looking forward to season 2. If that's how you feel, please tell me because I need some convincing. I was just deeply confused by this episode. So, cheers! Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll get into it in a few. Okay, I've had some wine. And we are going to get into the Wheel of Wine with the H in this case, because this episode made me unhappy. Essentially, there are 3 major conflicts in this episode. There's Maureen and Rand going to face the Dark One with, whatever it is that Maureen expected him to do in this scenario, which does not get clearer later in the episode. 2, we have Padan Fain in the city of Feldara, and we know he is up to no good, but we don't exactly know what he plans. And then the third big conflict is that Feldara knows that there is this horde of Trollocs coming through what's called Tarwin's Gap, which is also in the books, and they have to fight off these forces in order to protect the world from the armies of the Dark One, I guess, whatever. On the surface, all of those 3 conflicts going into this episode are fine. I expected all of them. They are all more or less from the books, although somewhat, rearranged in terms of which characters are where and what our understanding is of what it is that they're trying to do, but it is not executed well. So I have these notes here, and just so you are all aware, I do these reactions raw. I am not trying to do any fancy editing, any dissertations or analysis. I do want to try to do that for the season as a whole, looking backwards in a more ambitious take for my YouTube channel, but these reviews are very what I'm feeling right after watching the episode. I record my thoughts, I edit it lightly, and I upload it to get it up as soon as possible. So that is the direction that I am taking with these things. So you're just gonna hear me ramble. That's what this is. So the cold open for episode 8 of The Wheel of Time takes us back in time 3,000 years ago to the Age of Legends. We finally get to see Luther and Telamon, and I was initially excited. Oh, we're gonna get the prologue. But no, we don't get the prologue from the books. In the prologues from the books, we see Ishamael confront Luther and Telamon after he has gone mad and murdered his wife and children and servants and family members, and tells him what happened when he tried to seal the Dark One back in his prison. And in this version of the show, Luther and Telamon is sitting across from some woman named Latra that we don't know, speaking the old tongue, which was nice, talking about how, he might go and try to seal the Dark One's prison, and they have a pleasant conversation about it, and then it just ends. We learn nothing. We learn the word Tamerlane with a T, which is also in the prologue of the Eye of the World, and fans may differ on this. I always interpreted the Tamerlane to be the male side of the Isidae leader, but some interpretations have it as the actual word that then became corrupted over time to become the Amerlin seat in present day. And, either of those interpretations was fine, but that's all we got from this prologue. It was super disappointing. They had so much material to work with that could have been really interesting. Like, introducing Ishamael, since we have an actor for him now. I assume, I don't actually know because we don't get his name, but I assume that's who Rand encounters in the middle of this episode, and it might have been nice for audiences to see him 3,000 years prior and be like, who's that guy? And then have him show up at the Eye of the World, Dark One's prison, to try to tempt Rand to the dark. That might have been interesting, but, we didn't get that. We got the Age of Legends, and Luther and Telamon sitting in a very nice, palace-y looking environment, having a pleasant conversation with the Amerlin seat. And even just that was off for me, because this should be post-opening the Boar, when the whole world is in chaos and everything is falling apart, and they are so desperate to stop the spread of hate and evil and war and destruction and grief that Luther and Telamon makes this decision to gather his 100 companions, the male channelers that will come to his call, to go do this thing. And this moment could have been very tense and very interesting, shown on a battlefield with thousands of dead people and just like the desperate stakes that inspired him to do that. And instead we get people sitting in chairs, talking in very nice rooms about very important things, and then having the Amerlin seat of the time, or Tamerlane seat of the time, pleasantly decline, like Luther and Telamon has invited her to a corporate business meeting and she's too busy. What wasted potential. So I didn't like the prologue. And then we move into present day with Maureen and Rand, forcing their way through the show's version of The Blight. I did not comment on this at the end of the last episode because I wanted to see more of it, but I don't like it. It looks very fake to me to have all of these, decayed trees with their creepy limbs. Like, I watched some reaction videos from people who are like, oh, don't go in there, it looks creepy, but I think the description of the Blight in the books was better, where it's more of an arid desert that's hot and humid and sickly, like it just feels like it's decaying everywhere, and the trees are, I think, so cold they burst, or maybe so hot, I can't remember. It's like hot and cold and decaying plants in this very, like, bright white sparse place where nothing grows, and this kind of like twisted dying forest was just, I don't know, it looked like a theater, like a staged version of Into the Woods or something. I didn't care for it, and I particularly didn't care for, Maureen saying things like, don't touch anything, when clearly it's impossible not to touch anything given how dense this forest is. What did she mean by that? It didn't make sense. So, then we, you would think on this pathway to the Eye of the World that Maureen and Rand would have a conversation about what they plan to do when they get there, but they don't, and Rand doesn't even really ask about it. He asks Maureen whether she can teach him to channel, which would have been a nice world-building moment to explain that Sadar and Sadine are different halves of the True Force, which are explained in the, you know, little animated shorts that Amazon has, so it is part of this show's version of the world. But no, she tells him she can't help him channel because of the taint, and if he, you know, channels too much, he might go mad. And it's like, Maureen, you're gonna get to the eye of the world in a few minutes. Like, how fast do you think this madness is gonna take him? Like, it didn't make sense to me. So, okay, so I'm gonna go in kind of chronological order of what happens in the show, just based on my notes. So then we have this cutscene where Nynaeve and Lan are trying to figure out what to do since Rand and Moiraine had disappeared, and then just slowed the action down because they had already decided that they had disappeared and they were going to do something. So now everyone's just kind of sitting around this episode talking about how helpless they feel, which was not inspiring. I did not care for that. And then Nynaeve drops this, you know, I didn't track you. I tracked Moiraine. She has a tell, and I will tell you what it is so you can go after her. Like, what? Like, Nynaeve really does track Lan and Moiraine in the books, but I do not buy that Moiraine has a tell that Lan doesn't know about. They've been together for how long? I didn't care for that. It's not even essential to Nynaeve's character that she has tracking abilities, so I don't understand why they're emphasizing that so much. It would make more sense for her to, you know, give Lan a bunch of herbs or something, or offer to go with him in case healing is needed, or I don't know. But that whole conversation was difficult. I did like that they included the dialogue between Nynaeve and Lan that comes from the Eye of the World. If you watched my last video, you will have seen that I actually pulled my book out of the shelf and I read that part because I liked that scene in the books, and they did pull some of that dialogue from that scene and included it in episode 8, and I liked that. So that was a, you know, thumbs up moment for the story. But I don't know. And we got to see Nynaeve cry. I'll add that too. We got to see Nynaeve cry, and they did talk about how they would marry, essentially, if things were different, which, you know, felt a little sudden, but it feels sudden in the books too, so I was okay with it. It was fine. And then we have, you know, a cut back to Rand, who is asleep, and he wakes up thinking that the blight has taken him, which I didn't hate that. And then we see Moiraine killed with a sword going through the back of her head and through her mouth, and I knew that was a dream because I've read the books, and even though that doesn't happen in the books, I can just tell that this is a dream. I don't know if people who haven't read the books will be like, oh my god, Moiraine is dead, but I kind of think not, because that would be just an insane way to kill her off. So she gets murdered, and then Rand sees the figure with the glowy eyes that he's had a couple of, like, brief glimpses of in earlier episodes. We never get his, you know, chatty characterization that's in the books. They just, you know, we're seeing him introduced now, and they pull the mask off of him for some reason. I would actually prefer they'd kept the, you know, scary face on for him if they want us to believe this is the Dark One, but for whatever reason, he takes off his scary face, and we see it's, like, just a guy who's dressed in kind of modern-looking clothes, which I did not care for. He looked sort of like a, you know, music conductor or maybe a rabbi or something. I'm not sure what they were going for with that, but it wasn't impressive. It wasn't scary. He didn't look... He just, I don't know, was like a guy, and we're supposed to believe that he's the Dark One? Does Rand think this is the Dark One? Is what Moiraine thought the Dark One would look like? What do they think this person is? Do they think the Dark One can take the form of a person? It is not clear. I'm pretty sure because I read the books that this is supposed to be a Shamael, but for people who haven't read the books, like, what? It just didn't make sense. So, you know, he shows up, and you know, he says, like, you know, why did you come to me with only one Isidae? You came to me 3,000 years ago with 100 channelers better than this, and you failed. And I was like, yeah, why did you do that? What were you thinking? Like, it was confusing. And then he mentions that he's aware that Rand's father is Tam Thor and that he's from the Two Rivers, and okay, what? Like, if Ishamael knows who Rand has been this whole time and knew where he grew up and knew who his father was, why did he wait until he turned 20 to then, like, pull him into this location to have this chat? maybe there's an explanation, but I cannot tell you what that explanation is. It doesn't seem to make sense. I do not get it. I assume it's going to have something to do with Ishamael trying to convince Rand to turn to the dark rather than, you know, have their endless fights. But, you know, you'd think it'd be easier to convince a child if he knew where Rand was growing up this whole time to do something like that. So I don't know, I didn't get it. So then Moiraine reveals, you know, after this dream ends and Rand wakes up and is, you know, convinced that he has not actually seen Moiraine murdered and he did not murder himself with a sword. So he and Moiraine talk, and Moraine's trump card is to pull out this ter'angreal that she's carrying, and she tells Rand this is a sa'angreal, which I thought it was like, you know, the regular angreal that she uses in the books, just a different, you know, shape for the figurine. But no, this is a sa'angreal, which means nothing to people who are watching the show because none of these things have been explained. She explains it now, you know, in the last yard before the end of the show, that she has this very powerful object that Rand can use to do something. Again, I don't understand what it is that she thinks he's going to do. He doesn't know how to channel. And if you know he's channeled sort of accidentally before in a crisis, like it doesn't make sense. Maybe it would be better if she had said, like, because you are the Dragon Reborn, there's, you know, we think based on research that we've done that you should have all of the memories that you had as a powerful channeler 3,000 years ago, and if you can just get enough of the one power, maybe you can access those memories and then do the thing correctly that you tried to do. But she doesn't say that, so it didn't make sense. Like, I just didn't get it. And then, like, they have this conversation about how Rand thinks that Moiraine believed the Dragon Reborn was going to be Egwene, that he thought that too. And this is not a strong payoff for me for making the possibility that the Dragon Reborn could have been a woman. It just doesn't work for me. I don't get it. And I will do a fuller review of the whole season when I kind of look back on all the decisions that they've made and whether or not those decisions resulted in a payoff. This, to me, was not a payoff. This did not earn the, you know, lenience of changing that core story function in order to have an interesting twist. This was not a twist. It was just, oh, so you thought it was Egwene? So did I. Okay. Just wasn't that interesting. She's not even as powerful as Nynaeve. I don't get it. And then, okay, so then Moiraine tells the story about how when she was a novice, she struggled with channeling, and some Isidae that she does not name helped her to get over her block, I guess, maybe at the time. Not clear. Blocks have not been introduced in this version of the story. And does this by abusing her. So the message we're supposed to take away is that if you don't know how to channel and someone abuses you enough, you will suddenly be able to channel perfectly and do really complicated things like sealing the Dark One's prison with no training whatsoever. Like, what? Like, I did not buy that. It didn't make sense. Okay, we cut back to Min, who I do like. I think that actress is, like, really doing a good job making Min's character interesting. And she's looking around at the people in the bar, which includes Loyal. So he's back. Remember, he disappeared for half the episode, more than half the episode of episode 7. Now he's back at episode 8. Doesn't really do anything. He has a drink. Other people in the bar, and Min is looking around and seeing the future, and she's seeing, you know, foreshadowing of there being a great battle in which people are probably going to die. But I didn't need Min's abilities to know that, because we learned in the last episode that Tarwin's Gap was being defended, and okay, yeah, there's gonna be a battle, but there are battles all the time in the Borderlands, so it just didn't really have as much impact as maybe the showrunners thought it would do. I'm also not really a fan of Min being able to see, like, animated movies of people as opposed to just images that she doesn't understand. But I can understand why they want to do that for a visual medium. It might allow them more flexibility. It certainly did with her really overly complicated vision of Rand being the Dragon Reborn when she saw his father 20 years ago. It's still. So then, we learn about Tarwin's Gap, and we see Uno again. I did not talk about Uno in the last episode, but I appreciated his presence. I did not imagine him as short and stocky and blonde, but I love the eye patch. They did ugg up that actor enough to make his character an enjoyable treat for like the brief moments that he is present. What I did not like so much is Lord Aljamar standing at his window looking at Tarwin's Gap, which looks to be, you know, across the parking lot. Like, it's just right there. And there's a gap with a wall, and, okay, I guess there are Trollocs, like, behind it. Are they on the way? How do they know that? Are there scouts beyond that have brought back messages? Like, where is this information coming from? The mechanics of the impending battle were not clear. And I get that there were budget constraints for this season, where maybe they can't show us, you know, millions of CGI characters flooding into this gap from a distance, but it just felt hollow. I did not feel the conflict. I just felt like these characters were telling me constantly that this was more foes than they've ever faced. There's 5 times as many, and okay, but you also have a giant wall, so how do 5 times as many make it harder to get over the wall? Like, I just didn't get it. Even though it has sally ports that maybe they could take over, I don't know. I did not feel the hurdles for that particular conflict, and I don't understand why we're having all of this time being spent developing Lord Aljamar and Lady Amalisa and their relationship. Their relationship is not important in season 1, nor do these characters, they show up again, or Aljamar does, like, briefly, like, you know, 10 books later, or 13 books later, but I didn't need this much of them in this episode. I don't understand what the conflict with these characters was and why we were supposed to care about them an episode or 2 before the end of season 1. Like, it didn't make sense to me. And they show like this magical armor, and Aljamar's like, I'm not gonna wear it, but Amalisa's like, I will wear it. And it's like, what is this armor and why do I care about this? They never explain, so I don't know. I still don't know. It's not in the books. I don't know what that was. In fact, I will add actually that Amalisa's character has been completely overhauled for this version of the story. I don't mind them doing this for minor characters. It doesn't matter that much, but Lady Amalisa was one of, like, the truly nice women in the Wheel of Time series, and those of you who have read all the books know what I'm talking about. Robert Jordan did this thing where he was trying to portray strong female characters, but he would make them kind of unlikable by the time they became strong, and Lady Amalisa was an exception. She was super nice. Like, the entire time they knew her, she's this great lady. She was really, really sweet. She had all of these kind of, you know, giggling ladies in waiting that were part of her retinue, and Leandrin gets to her in the second book and gets her to try to find Rand for her, which we're not gonna get any of that plot line. So instead they made her, you know, a battle-hungry female warrior character like every other character we have seen in this show. I just wanted more variety, and I liked that Amalisa was a non-violent lady in the books, but whatever. It's not that important, but still annoyed me. Then we go back to Rand and Moiraine at the Eye of the World, and Rand says, I know this place. And I don't. What is he talking about? I know this place. The readers or the watchers of the show haven't seen this place before. I don't think it was in that cold open prologue, although again, this is a raw reaction, so I've only watched it once. He sees the, you know, symbol of the Isidae on the floor, the yin yang, which we are told is the ancient symbol of Isidae, and he seems to know what it means, but he doesn't explain it. None of this is explained. It just kind of, okay, so then Rand and Moiraine are in this location, and then suddenly Rand is in a dream, and you know, those of us who read the books know it's a dream, and I would guess that the show watchers will know it's a dream too. It's pretty obvious. All at once, he's back in his I don't think it's the same house that he shared with Tam, but it's similar. And he goes outside and he sees Egwene with his baby daughter Joya. For those of you who have read the books but don't remember, there is a scene where Egwene goes through the ter'angreal during her accepted testing, where she has this dream about her and Rand having gotten married and having a daughter named Joya, and Rand gets a bunch of headaches and she's unable to save him and chooses to become Aes Sedai as opposed to alleviating his pain. And that was, I think, her first vision in the ter'angreal for the test for accepted. So sort of from the book, except in this case, Rand is having this dream, and I didn't hate the premise of this. One of the things that's kind of always bothered me about Ishamael's character in the books is that he always tries to convince Rand to turn to the dark by yelling at him and threatening his friends and family, and it's like, okay, I don't know if anyone would be especially convinced by being threatened to turn to the dark, whereas, you know, Lanfear has a very different approach to how to turn Rand to the dark. So at least in this version, he's being a bit more clever and trying to give Rand something that he thinks Rand wants in order to convince him to break the wheel of time, to give in to the Dark One, and have all of the things that he thought he wanted. I didn't hate that as a concept. That was okay, and probably the best moment of this whole episode was when Rand does eventually resist Ishamael. I'm just gonna call him that, even though he never gives us any name. Not Ba'alzamon, not the Dark One, not Ishamael. We get no name for him, but I'm gonna call him that. He does resist him and say, this is the vision of the future that I wanted, but Egwene would not have wanted this. The woman I loved would have chosen to be Wisdom or to be Aes Sedai and not to be with me. And I got a little bit of some feels from that scene, even though it's not quite accurate because, like I just said, Egwene also has this vision when she goes through her accepted testing, which means it could have been a potential future for her from her point of view. But I still liked it okay. I liked the idea of the dark being, getting your own way at the expense of other people's free will, and Rand rejecting that. I was okay with that as a concept. That worked all right. And then we have this, cut back to the scene in Faldara when Egwene and Nynaeve are sitting around wondering how they can be helpful, and Amalisa is gathering channelers, and they're like, oh, I don't know if they want to help. And that didn't make any sense because in the previous episode, they were just talking about how they went on this journey for the sole purpose of protecting their loved ones. And here we have hordes of the Dark One's army at the Gap, and them both being fairly powerful channelers, with Nynaeve particularly being a powerful channeler, saying, I'm not sure if I want to help with this. Like, why? Why? And so then they eventually, though, they decide to go help, and they show up with Amalisa, and then she, kind of rejects their help. Oh, Moiraine's too. I shouldn't be surprised. Like, girl, you were the one that said, get any channeler, no matter how little they can channel, to come help me. Why are you rejecting these ladies? Why are you against them helping you? Do you have something against Moiraine? Like, I know they had a little bit of a contentious conversation in the previous episode, but it just didn't make any sense. All of their lives were on the line. Here are two powerful channelers who are coming to your call that was specifically for channelers. Why are you being such a bitch to them? And then, of course, she's, wearing the fancy armor, which we still don't know what it does, or if they said I missed it. And she's the one who wears it, and she wants them to channel the circle through her. Why? She could barely channel, or at least that was my interpretation when she and Moiraine had that conversation where she was turned away from the White Tower and being able to beat Aes Sedai, was because she didn't have the either strength of character or the ability to channel. So why would she control anything? It does not make any sense. So I just did not care for it. And then we cut to a scene with Perrin, who also is sitting around with Loial wondering, what can I do? I don't know how to help. It's like, Perrin, call the wolves. Call the wolves, Perrin. This whole season has been building up to you being the wolf brother. People are generally excited about that. It doesn't even occur to him. He doesn't even call the wolves in the season finale. No. Instead, he thinks about the way of the leaf. And I had to pause and think, wait, did Perrin adopt the way of the leaf? I know he said something about not eating meat in a previous episode, but I don't remember the moment where he said, I'm gonna join this cult and be a tinker. When did that happen? And I will set aside my opinions about Perrin deciding to be a tinker. I will save that for a review of the entire season. I'm just going to focus on this episode. I didn't know that Perrin had committed himself to the way of the leaf and that this was a struggle for him. I've mentioned it in previous reviews of the season that it might make sense for him to do that because of what happened with his wife in the first episode, but I don't recall him ever telling anyone, I'm a tinker now, I follow the way of the leaf and I will never do violence again. Do not recall him saying that. So apparently that's how he's feeling. And Loyal says, you know, there are other options to violence, you just have to ask. And it's like, okay. Then we have a scene, and there's a knock at the door, and it happens to be Padan Fain, although I didn't recognize his persona by his hand and the rings that are on his hand, but he says some kind of code word or something, so they open the door, and it's Padan Fain, and he has 2 Fades with him. And I think this is the first time in this entire season that we have seen that there are more than one Myrddraal in the world. I would guess that people watching the show may not have understood that that was a thing. They might have thought the Myrddraal was the head of the armies or like some big bad dude, and now we see like, oh, there's more of them. And also Padan Fain can control them or order them around or something, which is true for the books, but not explained in this context. Like, it was just confusing. We finally learn that the Horn of Valyria has been in Faldara all this time, and it's under the floor, and they're digging it up because the Trollocs are coming through Tarwin's Gap, and I just hated this. I don't hate it because it's different from the books, although I think the books had a better idea than this. I hate it because it doesn't make any sense. The audience has never heard of the Horn of Valyria, and throwing in some piece of dialogue of the horn brings back dead heroes to win the last battle, like right before you see it, and then not having it actually happen in the episode is a throwaway thing. It just doesn't have any kind of impact whatsoever. Even in reading The Eye of the World, in which the Horn of Valyria is mentioned many times before they get to the Eye of the World and find that it's there, like, you know, I kind of understood that there were a bunch of MacGuffins here and they're kind of important, and then you read the second book and you get, you know, more of a respect and understanding of the Horn, but this was worse. This was demonstrably worse. I thought that they were going to introduce the Horn in the second season when you have like a whole build-up around it, and or cut the Horn of Valyria completely from the story. I wasn't sure which direction they were going to go, but apparently we are going to get some kind of version of the Great Hunt, although I don't know what kind. And I guess the Horn was in Faldara all of this time, and they never had the temptation to dig it up and use it before because reasons. Again, the whole conflict with Tarwin's Gap is confusing. This is a big fight in the books, but I'll have to go back and look, but I don't recall Aljamar being particularly frightened that they were going to break through and overwhelm everyone. He might have been a little bit, but it wasn't last battle levels of urgency. It was much more of a, you know, potentially strong threat, strong enough for him to request that Maureen come to the battlefield with him to help reinforce his soldiers and to, you know, prevent more people from dying in order to fight back the Trollocs. But it wasn't this, it's the last battle. Like, it didn't feel like anything. So I hated it. All right, so then we have Fain break into this room. You know, he picks up the chest and bunch of people get murdered or hurt. So we see Loyal get stabbed. It looks very fatally stabbed, which is not resolved, by the way, by the end of this episode. Is Loyal dead? I don't know. And a bunch of other people in the room also grievously hurt, all except Perrin, who confronts Fain, sort of, except I guess he has the way of the leaf now, and Fain makes some cryptic remarks about his master and why he came to Emond's Field all of those times. It wasn't just to sell lanterns, it was because there were 5 Tavir in there, and they are going to bend the wheel towards their will, and isn't that impressive? And it's like, well, why didn't you murder them like any of the times that you came to the village? Like, what was the point of all of that? I didn't understand I didn't understand what Fane knew and what his orders were for going there if it wasn't to kill them. It didn't make any sense. He says something about, you know, you're all part of it, and I don't even remember. Look at my notes here. Okay, so Fane says that the Trollocs were not supposed to kill you. They were supposed to bring you to us. And that just seems like a weird shoehorned in thing. And I'm not gonna say the plot from the book was perfect either. It also has holes, like plot holes galore, but this did not smooth any of them over because it doesn't make sense. Why would you send Trollocs after these kids if you knew that they are all Ta'veren and can be turned to the dark? Why not send dark friends like yourself? It seems like that would be more successful. Were the Trollocs supposed to, like, run them all the way to the Blight? Like, I just don't understand what that was. And then he says, like, you know, some of you will turn to the shadow, maybe all of you, and they show Matt. So then Perrin goes to maybe pick up a weapon, and again, this is supposed to be some conflict with him having inducted himself into the Way of the Leaf, which never officially happened from my point of view. And Padan Fane makes this cryptic statement of, just, you know, apply a little pressure, paraphrasing, and you'll turn to the dark. And WTF from me. I'm going to cover this in greater detail when I talk about all the changes that they've made to the characters and the core of the story in my season 1 review of The Wheel of Time, but this just angered me because it is such an antithesis of who Perrin is as a character that I was just frustrated. Like, in the books, Perrin is never, not even a little bit, attracted to the Way of the Leaf. His whole thing is to be a protector and to save people's lives, and he does that by killing bad guys with an axe, and it's pretty cool. My video cut out, so I have to start again. So, Perrin picks up this axe, and Fane says something, oh, it's so easy for you to turn to the dark, and this implies that violence is evil in this version of the story, which is so antithetical to so many things that happen in the Wheel of Time. Like, granted, you know, Rand slowly goes mad, Perrin gets increasingly more violent, other things happen with other characters that creates a lot of gray area in terms of morality, but it is never implied in the Wheel of Time that fighting is an evil thing and that using weapons against evil people is an evil thing. So I don't know if this is just Fane's interpretation of what the light and the dark are, but I personally did not care for this kind of, this concept of making total pacifism from the Tinkers a viable way of life was just very antithetical. It was just very not the Wheel of Time. I did not like it. But anyway, we cut back to Rand, who rejects Ishamael in order to save Egwene's free will. I might be a little out of order with where I wrote down my notes and what things were happening in the actual show versus my commentary on it, but I hope you can stay with me. So we go back to the battle with Nynaeve and Egwene and Amalisa and some randos that are also there from the Faldara Keep, and there's this, again, very unexplained conflict of Amalisa wearing this armor, channeling more than she can actually manage by herself with a bunch of not even novices, wilders at this point, people who are helping her, and they manage to wipe out the vanguard of the army. Not even like the actual, you know, last battle levels of army. It's like the first wave. They wipe them out with lightning, and it's very impressive. It's some cool magic. And then she draws in too much of the power or can't control how much of the power she is wielding, and her face gets all hot, the way we saw Leandrin's face get hot in episode 4 of The Wheel of Time, and she actually burns herself to a crisp. So in this version of the story, burning out isn't just a, oops, I snuffed out my ability to channel. It actually burns the flesh out. And this also happens to Nynaeve in the story. And I don't know what to make of that. I'm very confused. So Nynaeve is part of this circle and Egwene is part of this circle, and they can't pull out their linked abilities, which, again, no one taught them how to link, so I don't even know how they got in the circle to begin with. They're a bunch of babies when it comes to channeling, but whatever, suspension of disbelief. Amelisa is controlling their power with her White Tower rejected abilities, and she burns herself out, and Egwene is in pain, and Nynaeve manages to, like, save Egwene's life at the expense of her own, presumably. And I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, so I'm just going to wrap up this part, but Egwene then, you know, subsequent scenes later manages to heal Nynaeve in some fashion, and she comes back to life, but this whole thing was confusing. I didn't know if Nynaeve was dead, if she was burned out, if she's alive now but still burned out. What exactly happened? Why can't Egwene heal? She never learned how to do that. Not that Nynaeve has officially either, but it makes more sense for her character, having been a wisdom for a long time and what's established for her arc in the books. So this whole scene was just confusing. And on top of all of that, I can't understand how they actually stopped the armies. It doesn't really seem like that one moment of channeling the power would have killed all of the Trollocs, and if the Feldarin armies were fighting with them, wouldn't they have also wiped out their own side? Where things are in this battle are so unclear. I couldn't follow it. It didn't make any sense. And what's worse is that this was supposed to be what Rand does in the book, which is way cooler because he's channeling all of the clean Saidin from the Eye of the World in the book, and he teleports or skims or travels, it's unclear, to Tarwin's Gap and saves everybody. He puts himself in between the coming forces and then just like burns all the oncoming armies to a crisp, and it's pretty neat, and I would have liked to have seen that version of the story in the Wheel of Time TV series, but instead we get this very confusing battle where it's unclear where the different forces are, why they think this is the last battle because there doesn't really seem to be that many enemies, how they knew these hordes were even coming, how long they've been coming. Did Feldara not ask the other Borderlanders for help with the White Tower or anybody? It's just, I don't understand it. So a lot of the things that happened in this episode were unsatisfactory from a logical standpoint, and that is what I have the most problems with. It's not that they're changing the plotline. I expected the plotline to change. There is no possible way that the Wheel of Time can be told in 8-episode seasons and a limited number of seasons. It's just not possible. I expected the plot to be drastically different. I did not expect all the characters to be different, all of the world building to be different, and for the general plot to not make sense. And I feel like that's what happened in this episode. I'm so disappointed. So anyway, then we have, you know, Fane say something like, this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Rand is the dragon, but all of you could choose the dark. And like, okay. And then Lan shows up to help Maureen. He doesn't really do anything except, you know, pick her up and cradle her, and she kind of comes out of her coma or comatose state and says that, you know, she's been stilled. She doesn't use that word, which would have been nice from a world building perspective, but she says she can't feel the true source anymore, the one power anymore, and Lan like holds her. And this was confusing. In the books, this does happen to a couple of Isidae. Definitely happens at Demai Wells, but it also happens when Swan Sanche is deposed as Amarylline. She has a warder, and she is stripped of stolen staff and stilled, and I think her warder ends up dying, and I think I'd have to look at the, you know, the lore specifically, but I want to say when the bond is snapped, regardless of whether the Aes Sedai is alive or dead, it has a very real, visceral impact on her warder, where he feels separated from her forever, and it just creates a catastrophic emotional implosion, which drives them to, you know, do insane things. And Lan's just kind of like, fine. In this episode, which means that all of that time that they spent in episode 5 building up the importance of the bond and what happens to warders when the bond is severed just feels hollow now. I don't even know if Maureen is really stilled. It might just be that Ishamael put a shield on her and tied it off. It's really unclear because We haven't gotten that much explanation of channeling. We don't even know who he is. Is he a channeler or is he the Dark One? I think people watching the show who haven't read the books are just going to be like, wait, what? What happened? What's wrong with Maureen? What does this mean for Lan? And I can't help them in the comments because I don't know. We're in new territory when it comes to the telling of the story, and I don't love it. So then Maureen also like picks up this rock, or maybe Lan does. I don't know. It looks like a piece of cheap quartz that you would buy like in a souvenir shop at like a, you know, one of those tourist traps where you go underground in like a mine or whatever, like a piece of cheap quartz. And they're like, this is Heartstone, Quaindiar. And could it look more boring? I don't think it could look more boring. It's definitely nothing so cool as the seals of the Dark One's prison, which, I don't know, do those exist in this version of the story? It kind of seems like they should, since they have spent an entire episode introducing the Amerlincy, and they did call her the Watcher of the Seals. So if the seals don't exist, what are the seals in this version of the story? We've never heard of Quaindiar or Heartstone before. It's just a MacGuffin. They don't explain anything. At least it's explained in the book. It was confusing then too, but at least it was explained. The seals in the Dark One's prison, and here's one of them. Here's what they look like. And that's not what we got in this version of the story. I don't think anyone watching who hasn't read the books is going to understand this at all. I don't think it makes any sense. It's just they're throwing all this information without any kind of tethering to what it means and why it's important, or even what it is. What's Quaindiar? What's Heartstone? I didn't think it could be damaged, but it is. Oh, that means this wasn't the last battle? Okay. I don't understand. And then if that was the case, you'd think Maureen would start panicking because Rand just walked off. He can't have gone far, Maureen. You would think if she came to this revelation that she and Lan would chase after him, be like, Rand, wait, this wasn't the last battle. You're not gonna go mad and die in the hills. You need to, like, you know, still fight the Dark One. But that didn't happen, and nothing is explained, so okay, that's just where the story's ending, I guess. Nynaeve is maybe burned out, maybe perfectly fine. Loyal may be dead or perfectly fine. Perrin might be a tinker, but like rethinking his ways. Padan Fain came with a bunch of fades to steal the Horn of Valyria for some reason, which, you know, they weren't even gonna dig it up until that moment, so like, was that his plan all along, or did he just seize an opportunity? Like, nothing is clear. Did the armies defeat the Trollocs at Tarwin's Gap? I don't know. I saw a bunch of lightning, but I didn't see an entire army disappear or anyone cheering or anything. It's just, I just don't understand what's going on. And so all these characters are in different places. They all are in various degrees of distress. It's not really a victorious ending. It's kind of confusing, and then we get an epilogue of some random girl on the beach minding her own business, and she looks out across the waves and all the Swanshan ships are coming. I like the Swanshan in the books. I think they're compelling antagonists. What are people supposed to think about this? Like, I guess in the reaction videos we'll see if this is really exciting or not. I would think it would just be confusing, because at this point we've only heard the barest of rumors of, you know, ships disappearing off the coastline. So here are some ships coming, and they zoom in and they show us some Damani and Seldams, and their outfits are drastically different from the books, and I'm going to cover costumes in my full season review because they are hit and miss for me. It's a little early to say, but I don't understand why they're making these drastic changes to things that were explained in the books. And I just, like, I don't get the face makeup and all these things that the Swanshan are shown to have. And, you know, the Damani, like, raise the waves to create this tidal wave. What, to kill the little girl? What was the purpose of doing that? What is the audience supposed to think that means? It didn't make any logical sense for why they would expend power to do that. It would make their ships wreck on the shore. So I just, like, I'm baffled. by the decisions made in this TV series. It did not feel like an epic win for our characters, which was what I was hoping for. I wanted to see Rand use his power in devastating ways to show us how powerful he is. We did not get any of that. Rand was boring in this episode. He did not do anything interesting except resist the Dark One. Okay, but he didn't do anything. He kind of like reached into his pocket to like grab the Sa'angreal and then like exploded the head of the guy who was standing in front of him, but like, meh. Compared to what he does in the books, that was just not that interesting. We didn't meet any Forsaken. We didn't even have the Forsaken explained to us. We don't know what they are, who they are. There's no way that anyone watching this TV series would have any idea of who this weirdo guy is, other than what they say he is, the Dark One. So then it's like, okay, that takes a little tension out of the story, because the Dark One seemed like this great, menacing, scary force that did not seem human in any way. And then they introduce him as like this guy wearing some disheveled robes. Like, that's not interesting. So I'm disappointed. I am disappointed in how the series finale ended. And I'm smiling a lot because it doesn't, it's just a TV show at the end of the day, and I'm still going to watch more of The Wheel of Time. It's possible that they'll get a budget increase, that they'll get better script writers, that the show will improve, or at least will continue to be sort of enjoyable sometimes when they manage to get the characters right, or to get any of the conflicts even close to what the original source material has. Please wait for my further dissertation of what worked and what didn't work in this retelling of The Wheel of Time as a TV series. I'm happy that it exists. I'm happy that Amazon has made supposedly a lot of money off of it. They did release numbers that the views are in the billions, which I guess is good. And they're able to sell a lot of merchandise, although I think they could do a better job at that. I was not impressed with the merch that is shown in the Amazon store to date. But the show is just not living up to the potential that it had to be. I did not expect the show to replicate the books chapter by chapter, scene by scene, even major plot points. I really didn't. I understand that that's impossible to do given how long the story is. So I expected a lot of things to be different, but I had hoped that the core characters and core conflicts and core elements of the world building would remain the same. And I think where they are doing that accurately is where people are enjoying themselves. And this just goes to show, showrunners are not better at writing stories than book authors. Very rarely does that happen. It may happen on occasion where you have a TV show end up being better than the source material it was based on. If you can think of some examples, throw them in the comments, but for the most part, that is not the case. And there are lots of reasons for that, one of them being that book authors have to spend a lot of time on their story before they can get it published, whereas, when you have a money-making engine saying, we're gonna give you a bunch of money to make this thing, whip it together and shove it out the door, like, that's what they end up doing, and it's just not as good. So overall, I'm disappointed, and I hate to say it because I really want to be a cheerleader for this show. I really, really do. I don't think Rafe Judkins is a bad guy. I'm not mad at any of the individuals that worked on this project. I know they're working very hard, that they really want the show to be a success, and the reviews are showing that people overall like it, so I guess they're doing something right, but there's just a lot to be desired from the lack of logical explanation in the way that the season 1 ended. And I'll be interested in seeing how people react to this, but I will not be surprised if there is a drop-off in season 2 compared to season 1 based on the lack of impact that some of these creative decisions ended up having in terms of payoff. Like the mystery of the dragon, kinda The whole conflicts that were set up kind of fizzled. And I just don't know if people are going to give a second season a chance. I hope that they do. I want the show to be successful. And the point of these types of reactions and reviews is not to, make people hate on the show or to get it canceled. It's to try to drive some semblance of understanding that this story could be told better. And I am hoping and praying that that is the case with season 2, but we will have to see. So until next time.